My parents divorced when I was only 8 years old. My mother had complete custody of me and my younger sister, Zalika. Me and her had a complex relationship, to say the least. It was often that she'd prefer Zalika over me. Now, I won't go into my personal life too much. Besides her being an overbearing parent that gave me the bare minimum of attention, whilst showering my sister with love. In turn, making her an entitled brat. And as you can probably infer, my home life was pretty miserable. With an oppressive and neglectful mother, along with a bratty younger sister, it could be a wonder how I dealt with it so effectively. In a home where nobody loved me, my only escape was the television. A show that came out a month after my parents' divorce. Specifically, a show from 2012 on Disney XD by the name of Randy Cunningham, Ninth Grade Ninja. I didn't think too highly of the show when it first came out, only viewing it as just another boys' show. However, nothing good was on, so I decided to watch an episode or two. And once I did, I gotta be honest, I was actually impressed. Besides the typical gross moments, it was all in all an outstanding show. I mean, the jokes were hilarious. The art design was greatly appealing, and the characters were entertaining. The aforementioned lead in particular, Randy Cunningham, was also extremely appealing to me as well. More appealing than iconic characters like SpongeBob or Mickey Mouse, for example. See, Randy gave me the impression of a loving, protective older brother. He cared for his friends and was a fierce fighter with a childish yet noble heart. However, many things airing at the time were considered a crude boys' cartoon in my mother's eyes. Phineas and Ferb, Kick Buttowski, Lab Rats. I mean, the list was endless. It took some convincing before she finally let me watch it. On the contrary, that it was the only boys' show I watched, and that I wouldn't pick up any detrimental behavior from it. I agreed to those terms. And every day, I would pre-record the premiering episode. I'd finish my homework at school so that I could have enough time to come home and watch the show. It paid off quite positively. The teachers were impressed with my work ethic, and my mom started to actually give positive attention to me. It was the closest thing to perfect. And that was until a new episode premiered. That's when everything started to go downhill. My mother was busy at ballet practice with Zalika, so I was left home alone. It was about 5 p.m. when I arrived, and a teacher had to drop me off since my mother hadn't arrived, which was typical. I changed into my pajamas, grabbed a couple of stuffed animals, and turned to the episode. The episode was called Schloomp, There It Is. And it was about Randy gaining an evil doppelganger via the ninja Nomicon. For reference, the Nomicon is basically Randy's mentor of sorts, but it's a book, right? It's either very straightforward or incredibly vague with its guidance. Either way, Randy doesn't take it too seriously. The description threw me off at first. The Nomicon was supposed to be a heroic figure in the show. Either Randy did something to anger it, or it was possessed by something. And I eventually got my answer while watching. It was sort of the former. It was the Nomicon missing with Randy, to make him more self-reliant, since he was pestering it too often, I think. Now, the evil clone of Randy, Noma Randy, was your typical evil clone. Until I paused the television. There wasn't anything particularly noteworthy about him. It was paused where Noma Randy would be positioned at an angle where he wasn't looking into the camera. And since my mother wasn't cooking dinner, I decided to make myself 2 sandwiches. I put the bread on the plate and spread some mayo and mustard on each slice. I went over to the fridge to grab some lettuce, turkey, and cheese. And that's when I noticed Noma Randy, who was now staring at me. It wasn't like he was right in front of the camera or anything. He was just standing there looking at me with a subtle smirk on his face. Besides the staring, there wasn't anything too unsettling until I started moving. I moved over to the side to close the fridge, looking down at the floor, while I walked to the plate. When I looked back up, it was almost like his eyes had followed me. I didn't see his pupils move. He was just looking at me. I felt a spectral feeling of his gaze still resting upon me. Unable to comprehend the situation, I simply looked at my sandwiches as I made them. The sinister feeling didn't leave. Even in a child's robust, imaginative mind, the occurrence it left me utterly bewildered. As much as I had desired to believe cartoon characters existed amongst the real world, this wasn't something I had expected or craved at all. After I was finished with my sandwiches, I grabbed a bag of chips and soda and walked back to the living room. I was looking down the entire time, not wanting to see him staring at me. I grabbed the remote and started the television again. Noma Randy was in his former position and no longer focused on me. The episode continued to play like normal. Being the naive kid I was, I simply assumed that the television wasn't working properly. I was halfway through my dinner when the phone started ringing, and since Noma Randy was no longer on screen, I paused the television without concern and answered the phone on the kitchen table. "Hello, this is Sharha Johnson. Who are you?" I began. I like to talk formally on the phone towards adults, like my parents would. "Yes, this is Miss Michael, the ballet teacher." "Shara, are you home alone?" Yes, I'm watching TV and eating dinner," I replied. "Really? No babysitter, or at least someone looking after you?" Miss Michael's tone was understandably bewildered. "No. Are Mommy and Zika coming home soon?" "That's exactly what I was calling about," she said. "I was wanting to make sure that they were home since I tried constantly to call them earlier." I grew more and more unsettled with the details, contemplating what could have happened. And curious, I started to ask questions about what happened before they left. "Well, we were preparing for a big competition. The training was rather prolonged and tiring, so some girls had forgotten their things," she started. "Including Zalika, they left her bag and nothing else. I was intending to call your mother to have it returned, but she didn't answer." "I've attempted to call her a multitude of times before deciding to call the home phone, but to no avail as well." Knowing my mother's routine of bringing Zalika to an ice cream parlor after a big practice, I assumed that they might have headed there. "All right, I'll call every parlor in town if I must, but not before checking up on you at home." The call ended there. This time nothing happened when I paused, since Noma Randy wasn't on screen, further proving my assumption of the television malfunctioning. A while later, Miss Michael had arrived. She was on the phone talking with numerous ice cream parlors, even some on the outskirts of town, while I watched television. None of them knew where my mother and sister could have gone. Miss Michael let me stay up late since it was Friday, and on the condition that I could help her find my mother and sister. I gave out as much information as I could. Grocery stores, playgrounds, spas, anything. But my mother and sister were nowhere to be found. Eventually, Miss Michael got law enforcement involved, and a search was sent out for them. We didn't get a call back until 1 in the morning, when they found my mother's car. It was parked in a desolate parking lot in front of a forest. Which was odd. My mother never even thought about parking in such an area, especially with Zalika in tow. The police opened the car to find nobody inside, but my mom's keys still in the ignition. The odor of sulfur was strong in the car, apparently originating from a red powder found within it. The powder was unidentifiable and was kept under investigation alongside the vehicle. Miss Michael comforted me and sent me up to bed, saying that she'd take me to my father's home in the morning. I did as I told, brushed my teeth, and went straight to bed. While I was ecstatic about the fact that I was going to stay with my father, I was also very nervous. See, I didn't particularly love my mother, and my love for my sister was withdrawn, but I still cared for them. Zalika was only a young child, and she had plenty of time to mature and had a great future ahead of her. My mother would have grown older and realized the errors of her ways. Whether either of them deserved it or not still perplexes me, but that wasn't my only concern. The thing that concerns me most is Noma Randy. Why was he staring at me? And did he have anything to do with the disappearances of my mother and sister?